Good Sunday, church. How you doing? Hey, you know it's going to be a good Sunday night when you got Rapper's Delight and you got Missy Elliott. I mean, come on. You know what I'm saying? Church should be fun. Don't act like you're all holy. You know what I'm saying? Like, church should be fun. You say, I just don't know, Pastor. You know what I mean? Like, hey, if you're new, you're hanging out for the first time, we want to welcome you. Thrilled that you chose to hang out with us this weekend. My name's Jack, and I get to be one of the pastors here, and we love it that you chose to spend time with us. And if you don't know a ton about our church, don't know a lot about our church, we just need you to know that we're people just like you. We don't have it all together. We don't have everything figured out. We make mistakes. We got real issues going on in our life, but the good news is we believe in a real Jesus, and we know that he can change anything and everything. And so we're excited as we continue to lean in and follow him for the plan that he has for our life. And we need you to know, if you feel like you know a lot about Jesus, man, we applaud that. We think that's awesome. But if you don't know anything about Jesus, you're skeptical about Jesus, you're just kind of checking out your faith, we need you to know that we think you belong here. We think you found a great place to hang out, and we just love it that you're on this journey with us. Today, if it isn't incredible enough already, it's going to get even better because today is Baptism Sunday. Yeah, Baptism Sunday. And we know what that means, right? Like, we party as a church, you know what I mean? Because we celebrate when people are taking next steps in their faith with Jesus. We have a party with a purpose. It's not a party just a party for no reason, right? It's the kind that makes you feel real good when you wake up in the morning. Amen, somebody? Amen. Right? Just trying to make sure you're with me, you know, because I know how it is, you know. Hey, but that's what baptism is all about. It's about this public expression. It's about going public with your faith, saying, I'm choosing Jesus as first in my life. And what's incredible about that is we've already celebrated with 14 people at the earlier services today that have said yes to Jesus through baptism, right? And so I believe, here's what I believe. I believe we have a few more tonight, right? And here's what else I believe. I believe that there's some people in the room right here, right now, that you didn't anticipate getting baptized today. Just going to say it. You didn't anticipate getting baptized today, but I have a feeling the way that God has been working and moving today, God's going to begin to work in your heart. He's going to begin to nudge you a little bit. He's going to push you one step closer to getting baptized. And our question to you at Cityline is, what are you waiting for? Right? What are you waiting for? Just take that next step. My encouragement to you as God continues to nudge you in your heart to take that next step, would you just be obedient? Would you just be obedient? I know what you're thinking. You're like, I didn't plan to be baptized, so I don't know that it's physically possible. Let me tell you, it is. We've seen it happen today. Okay? We've seen people jump in their clothes, right? Like, not, they're willing to go home wet. We that's cool if you like it like that, but we also have clothing for you. If you feel like God's put it on your heart to be baptized, we'll give you shorts, we'll give you whatever you need, we'll give you shirts, we'll give you towels, we'll give you undergarments. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you can feel safe and secure as you choose to take that next step. And you say, well, why would you even do that? Because we're all about removing the obstacles and barriers that exist between someone taking a next step with Jesus. Amen. Right? We don't want you to walk out of here thinking like, man, I wish I would have, could have, should have, right? So what we're going to do is provide that opportunity for you. But before we get there, I'm going to dive into part 3 of this series that we've been in over the last few weeks that we're calling Flip the Script. And I love what's happening in this series because we're just kind of highlighting the last 3 to 3.5 years of Jesus' life. It's as documented in the Gospels according to Matthew and Mark and Luke and John. And we are discovering more about Jesus and who he is, what Jesus said, what Jesus did. And that should be important for us, especially for those of us that are saying we are following Jesus, to know what Jesus did, to know the things that Jesus said. Because if you don't know this or not, you and I, we're created in the image of God. We were created in the likeness of Christ. To become more Christ-like is the goal of a Christ follower. So it's important for us to identify who Christ is, what he's done, what he said, and how do we actually apply that to our life? How did this kind of small band of followers and misfits with no military power and no land and nothing to their name, how do they against all odds survive and actually multiply throughout history? What was the difference? It's because Jesus didn't come to bring something that was an and sort of thing. Jesus wasn't like, well, here's Jesus and whatever else you like to do. No, Jesus said, I'm bringing something instead of the way you're living life right now, instead of the direction that you're heading right now. I'm totally flipping the script in your life and calling you to greater, calling you to something different, calling you to something more. And we learned in week 1 that Jesus, when he started his earthly ministry, Pastor Troy set us up well with this idea that Jesus, he stands up in the synagogue. As he's getting ready to launch his ministry, and he says something profound about himself in Luke 4:18 and 19. That's not in your notes, but if you want to just document that, Luke 4:18 and 19. It says that the Spirit of the Lord is upon me. This is Jesus speaking. He says, for he has anointed me to bring the good news to the poor, and he sent me to proclaim that the captives will be released, and that the blind will see, and that the oppressed will be set free, and that the time of the Lord's favor has come. Now, that's a mouthful. That's a lot for Jesus to say. And if you're not following along or picking up what Jesus is putting down, Jesus says, hey, heads up, the Messiah is here. Hey, heads up, something new is happening among you. Hey, heads up, all these things that you dreamed about, thought about, prayed about, hoped for, it's here right now. It's being fulfilled in me. And because I am on the scene, guess what? There's good news. There's captives that are being released. There's prisoners that are being set free. From what? From the chains that bind you and I. Being held captive from everything that is going on in our life, Jesus says, I can bring you freedom in that moment. And that's incredibly good news. That's not bad news. That's not discouraging news. That's not weird news. I just want to say if there's anything weird about Christianity, it's because people made it weird. There's nothing weird about Jesus. Jesus is all good, right? Like Jesus is good. We can trust Jesus. Jesus can be trusted. But the problem that many of us have when we're trusting Jesus is sometimes Jesus calls us to things, or Jesus encourages towards something that actually feel really uncomfortable. Pastor Soy spoke last week, and he said that as Jesus was telling a parable, he used the idea of a good Samaritan to help be reminded of this rule that was in the Old Testament, this law that they understood and know, that you love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your mind, and all your soul. But in reality, Jesus took it up a notch. Jesus flipped the script. He also said that you are to love your neighbor as yourself, and not just to love them, but love them as I have loved you. I mean, that's deep. That's something that it's like, I don't know how to do that. So they ask the question. This religious lawgiver says, hey, so exactly who is my neighbor? Right? You ever been there, right? You're like, God, really? Are they my neighbor? God, that annoying person at work, is that my neighbor? God, there's some people on my street I don't like. God, there's some people in my life that I have a hard time with. And God says it's not about justifying who you like and who you don't like. It's that everyone that you come in contact with, whether you like them or not, whether they're different than you, whether they believe the way you believe or not, maybe they don't even think anything like you think. The reality is that's your neighbor. They need the love of Jesus. They need to experience Christ through you. And Jesus takes it a step further. And in this context, it was about racism. It was about division between classes, between races. And Jesus says that now that I am here, you need to understand that I've come to destroy those things that society and culture say to divide us, because those will never be greater than the one thing that unites us, and that's Jesus Christ. He says, I've come to destroy those barriers so that we can understand that we are all a part of the family of God. That together we are a part of his family, created in his image to do the good that he's prepared in advance for us to do. But Jesus also recognized something about humanity, the people that he was dealing with, the people that he was working with. It's incredibly hard to love God and to love others when you're so focused on yourself. Isn't that interesting? I mean, isn't that true of us in our culture? If we're honest, sometimes it gets a little bit about ourselves. It gets a little bit like selfish. I mean, you don't have to point them out in church. You don't have to nudge them, you know what I mean? Because you think they are. But you probably have selfish people in your life, or you've referred to people as being selfish, right? And you might push back, and you might say, like, I don't know that that's true. I don't know that's true of me. Just before you go there and want to push back, I just want you to know that the United States has been known for some pretty incredible inventions, right? But the most recent one that most people really tend to enjoy and love the most is, did you know that the United States has been accredited for the creation of the selfie? The selfie, right? It's self-explanatory, right? Like, you don't even have to describe what is a selfie. But in case you didn't know, I did some research for you to help us understand how we are so about ourselves, and we got to let everybody know about what we're doing and where we're doing it and how we're doing it and all this, that it's incredible. Okay, so I looked up selfie on my phone, hashtag selfie, right? 386 million posts. 386 million times, right? That there's people posting a selfie, which would lead me to the question, about what? Like, what's so important about you that you got to post that much? And then I started to scroll through different kinds of selfies, and I was like, no, it's true, like this one, right? The bathroom selfie. Why in the world would we ever think about taking a picture of ourselves in the bathroom is beyond me until you realize that it's in the bathroom that you find the best lighting for photography, apparently. That it's in the bathroom that when you hold your phone at the perfect 45-degree angle and you get that slimming effect and the light shines off the mirror, you're suddenly glowing. You're like, I'm keeping that one. I don't care about the toilet in the back. You know what I'm saying? Like, that one's good, right? Or what about this one? The food selfie, right? It's like me and my chicken wing. You know what I'm saying? It's like, why? Just why? Why are you doing that? I don't know. I don't know if he's offering it to somebody. I'm not sure. We have this kind of selfie. This next one. Yeah, the gym selfie, right? Don't you love the gym selfie? I've done the gym selfie before, right? I'm just hoping for progress. I don't know what this guy's doing. I think he's just hoping that people notice that he showed up at the gym, right? Because you want to hashtag gains, hashtag, swole, and I'm just like, I don't know, dude. You know what I mean? Like whatever. But we do this, right? And it doesn't stop there. What about this one? Yeah, when your outfit's just right. You got denim on denim and you're feeling it. Right? You know what I'm saying? Like, it's too good to pass up. You got to take a snapshot of this moment. You got to post that selfie. And then lastly, we got this one. Yeah, it's the caffeine buzz selfie. You know what I'm saying? When the coffee's just so good, but yet you time it just right that you know exactly where you got your coffee from. So you can also hashtag Starbucks, hashtag free stuff, hashtag, free cup of coffee, right? Whatever it is, right? We just feel like we got to let people know what we're doing in a wide variety of ways. Why do we do this? Why is it all about us? Why do we feel the need? Something that seems so fun and innocent and harmless actually could be something that's actually detrimental in our life. Something that actually is causing kind of this undercurrent of it being all about me, about being inward focused to where we fail to see beyond ourselves. Yet, there are people in this world that have recognized they failed at the selfie. I went ahead and I hashtag selfie fail as well. And here's what I learned. I learned that 142,000 people or 1,000 posts are this selfie fail, right? Just kind of this selfie failure. Things like this guy has no clue what's going on in the moment, right? Everybody else is on board with the selfie moment. This guy doesn't know what's happening. Or this one is my personal favorite, right? When your baby learns early on how to photobomb. You know what I'm saying? It's just one of those, it's a selfie fail. But you know what's most fascinating to me about this? 142,000 times people said, I'm gonna post about even my selfie failure because I think that whether it's a failure or whether it's a good one, you still need to know about me and what I'm doing and where I'm at and what's going on with this. Jesus also encountered this a lot as well. People were all about themselves, worried about their position, worried about their level of power, worried about their level of influence. In fact, it wasn't just people out there. It was in Jesus' tightest circle, in his community group of like 12 guys that he hung out with, his disciples. They were pushing and shoving, trying to figure out who was going to be the self-promoted best one, right? They're going to be the self-promoted fastest one. You know what I mean? Like when John writes stuff in his gospel, he makes sure to tell you that he was the one that Jesus loved. Right? When they write the accounts of Jesus having risen from the grave, like one of them makes sure to let you know that he outran everybody to get to the grave before everybody else. Talk about a selfie moment. In this case, there's two of them are arguing and they're fighting over who's going to sit on the right and who's going to sit on the left of Jesus. When Jesus was coming into power, so they thought that he was going to be this military power or this governmental power, restoring the Jewish people. We're going to sit on his right and we're going to sit on his left. And every time you see a picture, boom, selfie, me and Jesus right there, ready to go. They didn't think that Jesus would go for it, so they got their mom involved. And they said, Mom, why don't you talk to Jesus for us? And tell Jesus, ask him who's going to sit on the right and who's going to sit on the left. Jesus not having any of it, never wasting a teaching moment, Jesus leans into the moment and he says this in Mark 10. Mark 10, starting in verse 42. Jesus called them all an example of how it's done. Because you know one thing I love about Jesus? Jesus doesn't do things that or ask us to do things that he won't do himself. Jesus is not asking us to do something that he can't or won't do. In fact, Jesus responds with, for even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and then to give his life as a ransom for many. Countercultural. Jesus is offering an alternative to the dominant cultural norms, the religious options that were present in his current world. That instead of lording it over, you would learn to come alongside. Instead of pushing your way to the top, making it about you, you would learn to serve. You'd be willing to be uncomfortable. You'd be willing to sacrifice. You would be willing to lean in and come alongside those, especially those who can't help themselves. To which we would say, well, why would Jesus talk in this way? I mean, why would Jesus flip the script with that kind of dynamic? It's because of this. If you don't know this or not, the church is God's plan to influence, impact, and bring change to our world. If you don't know that, how's our world going to change? You look at the problems that we're having, the issues that are at present. You're looking at all the things that you get frustrated about in your culture and society, and you wonder, how is this going to work itself out? And Jesus is saying, guess what? You're my plan. You're my plan A. It's about you, the church, those Christ followers, those that have chosen to follow me. How are we going to impact the world? It's through us stepping up as the church. How is freedom and release and healing and restoration and reconciliation and greatness, how is that unleashed? It's when we come alongside and begin to serve. It's when we recognize those who can't help themselves and we say, how can I help you? Because our ultimate desire is to reflect the image of the Father in the world in which we live. To reflect the image of God himself where he has placed us in every domain. There's been a lot said about God, but to kind of set up our time together today, there's a passage of scripture found in Old Testament book of Psalms that I want to read to you that I feel is just a powerful picture of who God is. A powerful understanding of who God is and what God does. It says in Psalm 68, 5 and 6, it says that God is a father to the fatherless. He's the defender of widows. This is God's whose dwelling is holy. God places the lonely in families, and he sets prisoners free, and he gives them joy. Now, can we just pause there and just take that in for a second and think of the imagery of that? God is a father to the fatherless. He's the defender of widows. This is God whose dwelling is holy. I love this. God, he places the lonely in families, and he sets prisoners free, and he gives them joy. Endless joy, overflowing joy, unending joy. This is God and who he is. It's God and what he does. To which we sit here and we hear that and we think of the imagery and we're like, why does that hit us in such a way? Why does that connect with our heart? Like, why does that do something inside of us? And this is what I would suggest. It's because when you read through this, you understand that if you are a follower of Jesus, this is exactly what God has done for us. This is exactly what God has done for you and I. God saw us. He saw us abandoned. He saw us that we needed a good, loving, heavenly Father. He came alongside. He became our defender in our moments of loss, in our moments of grief. God took us from where we were and when we felt ostracized and alone and by ourselves, and he brought us in. He accepted us, adopted us into his family, and not only adopted us into his family, but he set us free, giving us a joy that overflows. Amen. A joy that's unending, a joy that never, ever fades. It's so powerful when you connect the dots with what God has done for us. James, who is also known as the brother of Jesus, he was the kind of guy that could connect the dots. He was the kind of guy that understood a little bit about Jesus and his character, but also not just about Jesus, but how that influence and the impact that Jesus had on our life now calls us to influence the lives of others. James, in James chapter 1:27, he says this. He says, religion that God our Father accepts as pure and faultless is this: to look after orphans and widows in their distress, and to keep oneself from being polluted by the world. James says this is how it works. that you use what you have, you use what you've been given to come alongside those who can't help themselves, to extend the love of Jesus while you yourself, staying focused on your relationship with God, continues to grow and develop. He says he doesn't call you out of this world. He doesn't try to separate you from the world. He sends you into the world, being who he's created you to be, to send peace, hope, reconciliation, freedom to the captives that need to be set free, to the people in our lives that need Jesus the most. Here's what I'm saying. I believe that God calls us as a church to see beyond ourselves and to actually care about those who are in need. Today, I want us to unpack that a little bit more. And as we do, I want to introduce you to a friend of Cityline Church, a friend of mine. I'm going to invite him to come to the stage and hang out with us. His name is Jaime Zavala. He is the LA County Director, for Olive Crest. Would you please give him some love as he comes to hang out with us today? Jaime, how you doing, man? Good. Thank you so much for being here with us. I really appreciate you spending some time with us today. Jaime's been with us all day long, just so you know, and I'm thankful for that. You know, it's been a huge impact on us as a church. But Jaime, why don't you just tell them a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Awesome. Like Jack said, my name's Jaime Zavala, and I have the privilege of serving as the executive director for Olive Crest here in Greater LA. Olive Crest is a faith-based organization, and we're actually literally your neighbor 4 doors up the street. We're all over Southern California, Vegas, and Washington, and basically we exist to serve the widows and the orphans of our communities. Here in LA, we do a bunch of stuff, but I like to break it down into 3 different areas. One is in the area of prevention, so keeping kids, and by the way, we serve vulnerable kids and families. So one of the things that we do is prevention work through a ministry called Safe Families for Children. Actually, that's been here as part of Cityline, and I think starting this weekend, we're going to have a lot more families. It's been amazing to watch a lot of your friends who came earlier in the day. Maybe they were super energized, but they have stepped up. And so what Safe Families is, it's a ministry where local churches identify people who want to host kids who are in a crisis situation. This is not foster care. It's trying to keep kids out of foster care by loving on these kids while typically it's a single mom who's in trouble under the age of 30, kids under the age of 5, and she finds herself in a challenging situation, whether if it's domestic violence, substance abuse, instability in housing or work. And before she gets into a situation where she might expose her kids to abuse, abandonment, or neglect, the church comes alongside of her, keeps her kids for a short period of time, and then when she's ready to get them back, she can. It's an amazing ministry. 98% of the kids who get served through Safe Families will never enter the foster care system, which is a huge blessing. And then the other thing that we do that's prevention work is that up the street we have a family resource center open 5 days a week to families and kids in the community. We do after-school tutoring, mentoring programs. During spring break, we're going to have a day camp. During the summer, we'll have a free day camp for kids in the community. Just trying to provide them with a positive place to be, to stay out of trouble, and to have people who love them and love God come alongside of them. And then for kids who unfortunately enter the system, we have foster adoption families that will step up, and we certify, recruit, and train those families. All of the families that we identify come from local churches. That's something that's unique to Olive Crest. And then we also provide mental health services here to kids and families in the community. The last thing that we do is that there are kids who, at the age of 18, age out of the system, and unfortunately they haven't been adopted. They don't have a permanent family, and the statistics of those kids is heartbreaking. And so many of these kids choose to not stay in the system, even though they can after they turn 18. For those who do, we provide housing. We have apartments in Lakewood, Bellflower, and Whittier, where we not only provide them with housing, cover their utilities, but we also provide them with a case manager, mentors from communities like Cityline, and then also independent living skills. So by the time these kids turn 21, we can launch them into adulthood. Every time one of our kids comes into that program, I think about where I was in life at 18, and I thought, I was a mess, right?
Yeah.
And I had a family.
Nice way to say it, right?
I had a family. I had a support system. These kids don't have that, and they're being basically thrown into adulthood. And so the opportunity to love and serve on these young men and women is a privilege for us.
Amen. Yeah, one of the reasons why we wanted Jaime to come and talk about Olive Crest today is a couple of reasons. One, my guess is like me for quite some time, you drive up and down Woodruff to go to any number of places along Woodruff or on your way to somewhere else, and you drive by this place called Olive Crest, and we have no idea all the great things that are going on through this organization. To ask Jaime to just to share a snapshot of what that is, it's almost like that fire hose just opens up and it's like, here's what we do, and it's like, whoa, all this stuff is coming at you because it's amazing. It's amazing work. We also wanted him to come and share today because we are establishing a partnership that we as a church, we have already been in a relationship with Olive Crest, and the way that we've done that primarily outside of some work with Safe Families is, you know that if you go to church here, generosity is a value here. We want to live a life of generosity. And the way that we've done that is we've taken offerings above and beyond your regular giving, and anything you've given to those things, we've given that away. Olive Crest has been one of the organizations that we've just given that blessing to just to help them continue to do the incredible work that they're doing there. But we're saying as a church, it's time for us to step up and go to the next level. That it's not about just giving money or writing a check, or this is about us rolling up our sleeves and actually getting involved, putting some skin in the game, actually mentoring kids and coming alongside families and taking in kids who, to no fault of their own, are in a bad situation. The church is the hope of the world, and we can do something about it, right? We can make a difference in the lives of people. So, Jaime, just tell them a little bit about, give them some numbers. When we talk about the foster care system, when we talk about today, we've talked about a lot, sex trafficking and different things like that. Give them a snapshot of kind of like what we're dealing with.
Absolutely. So prior to coming to Olive Crest, I was actually on staff at a church, and I was in charge of local and international outreach. And I basically got a letter from the Department of Children and Family Services in LA County and started to research what's happening in the system in LA. There are close to 35,000 kids in the foster care system in LA County. That is more kids in foster care than any other state in the nation. When somebody said that, I was like, you are full of it. And I've jokingly said, that's like a pastoral number, right? Like when a pastor says, there were 10,000 people there, and there was like 50. It's like, well, all right, speak it in faith, brother.
Yeah.
These are real numbers. These are real kids. We touch them every day. More kids in foster care than the state of Illinois, New York, Florida, Texas. It's crazy, really, what we're dealing with here in our own backyard. And I was embarrassed when I heard that number, and I thought, like, here I am helping to send people across the world to go serve in missions. And there's nothing wrong with international missions. I was an international missionary. But it's like, we don't even have to we just have to walk down the street to serve our neighbor. And so here's kind of the other stuff that's really heartbreaking. Of the people who are trafficked, and sex trafficking is a huge issue here in Southern California. Over 60 to 70% of those people have a common thread of foster care. So I have a lot of friends who really are passionate about human trafficking, and the thing that I've said to them is, you really want to deal with human trafficking, deal with and help serve kids in the system.
Right.
Because that's how we're going to curb human trafficking. For those who age out of the system, the young men, over half of them will end up in prison within 18 months. The young ladies will end up or men will end up trafficked, about 50 to 60% of them. Half of them will end up homeless. Only 2 to 3% of them will actually graduate from college. Maybe half of them will have a high school diploma. And here's really the most heartbreaking part, is that the young ladies, half of them will end up pregnant and with children by the time they turn 19. The young men, 75% of them will be dads by the time they turn 21. And most of those young men and women, their kids, will end up in the system as well, which just perpetuates the cycle of abuse, and that's what we want to help stop.
Yeah.
Every day, every 10 seconds, there's a report of child abuse, and every day 5 kids die of abuse. That is wrong. Mm-hmm. That is not some foreign country. That's here in the United States, and I think God's heart is breaking for these kids, and we are called to be the solution, and that's I love it when the body of Christ comes together like Cityline and says, we want to be a part of that.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. How do you think it is that a church or us as people, how do we build relationships with our neighbors, and how do we kind of do good within the context of those relationships that we're building?
Yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of things I can say, and I've said all weekend, but I think first is you have to have a heart of humility. You can't go into something like this and say, I got all the answers, I got it all figured out, let me tell you how to fix your life, because people will shut you down like in 2 seconds.
Right.
They've been told what to do forever. They don't need one more person to do it. Secondly, and this is huge, and it kind of goes alongside with the humble heart part, is be a listener. There are people dying to have somebody hear their story. And this isn't just kids in foster care. This is your neighbor. This is your coworker. We do a lot of talking, not enough listening, especially as Christ followers. So just listening to people. And then the 3 things that have just kind of been stirring in me all weekend as I've been sharing is really just the values of Olive Crest, which are grace, truth, and servanthood. In order to serve the least of these, you got to have those 3 things, and probably a lot more. But I think grace, these kids have come from very, very challenging situations, and the last thing that they've been given is grace. And so when somebody comes alongside of them and gives them a second chance and a third chance and a fourth chance and a 10th chance and a 20th chance, but by chance 50 at Olive Crest, we're like, okay,
Right.
all right, Lord, what's next? And it's it's which comes to our next value, which is truth. You gotta speak the truth in love with a lot of these kids, because they've been fed a lot of lines, they've been kind of given empty promises, but they haven't experienced grace and truth. And something that really even this morning God kind of highlighted to us was this line of like, grace without truth is fruitless. Truth without grace is condemnation.
Right.
And we want to have fruit. We want to see fruit in the lives of these kids and families, but we also want them to experience the unconditional love of God. I love that passage in Luke 15 where the father, which was, in biblical times, like the concept of a dad running towards his son was like unheard of. Right. And this is God running after his kid. And that's what we want these people to experience. And then the last thing is having a servant's heart. That we don't do it because we want something in return. We do it selflessly. And so many times we've served kids over and over and over and over again, only to be disappointed, only to have our hearts broken. And it's okay. Yeah. It's okay. Not every time that we serve a kid or a family is it going to turn out to be amazing. Sometimes it's going to be heartbreaking as they walk away. But we know that we've planted the seeds of love, and they've experienced Jesus in a very tangible way. And so those are the things that I would say as we come alongside of our neighbor, as we come alongside the widow and the orphan, that is, if we can hold those things very loosely and kind of those 5 things that I've just mentioned, I think we will see amazing fruit happen. It may not happen in our lifetime, just being honest, but that's not what God calls us to. He doesn't call us to serve him so we could see fruit. He calls us to serve him in obedience, and it's up to him to do the work.
Amen. Amen. So I know for me, and probably for others in the room, and I know I've had conversations even within my community group about like when it comes to an idea of coming alongside and serving people, there's lots of ideas of what that looks like or what that means, And I think even in the church, you talked about long-term missions or going somewhere far away, and the reality is we're discovering there's lots of stuff in our own backyard. And I've always been a fan of, hey, unless we're actually making traction, making a dent in our own backyard, why are we going somewhere far away to do what God's called us to do right here? So my question that I want you to help us with is talk about how do we actually empower those that are in need in a way that is God-honoring?
Gosh, so many thoughts come to my mind. I think the first thing is what our neighbors rarely experience is somebody giving them dignity. And so when you think about the kid who's been bounced around from home to home, a lot of these kids have been 10, 15, 20 foster homes. They come into our office with their head down. that guy or that gal that you see at Arco that's asking you for money, they probably don't look at you in the eye. And that's because they're filled with shame. And so literally looking down and kind of having them look up and looking at them in the eye and just giving them eye contact is huge. I do that even with my own son. Like when he does something wrong, I'm like, look at me in the eye. Because we're so, there's so much shame that we can carry, and our friends carry a lot of shame. And so giving them eye contact, listening to them, taking the time, being willing to be interrupted. And I have a sermon series for you already called Holy Interruptions.
All right.
How many times does God how many times does God want to interrupt your life for his sake and for his kingdom, but you're too busy with texting or the next appointment? And if you were to look at my Outlook, my calendar's packed. It's like, do we build margin for people, for those in need in our lives? But we don't, because we're so busy running around from here to there. And so giving people dignity, looking at them in the eye, and also what's that phrase, like something about leading a horse to water, right?
Yeah.
Like sometimes it's not just giving that quick handout because I'm too busy, but being willing to be in relationship with people, which is messy and hard and takes time and energy and patience and grace and truth and servanthood. Like, it's not easy,
Right.
but God didn't call us to easy.
Right.
I wish somebody would have told me that being a Christian was going to be hard, because I might have not have signed up for it. But you know what? I'm stuck, I said yes to him, and now I have this thing. And I think you and I, especially if you haven't jumped into the deep end of the pool of saying, yes, God, I'm available to you, you're going to find that it's like an adrenaline rush, and you're going to say, God, where else? Where else are you calling me to?
Yeah.
And our prayer and our hope is that if he's calling you to the work that we're doing, that you're going to say yes in whatever way. So I know I'm kind of rambling, but I think hopefully there's something there that you've caught, that of how we come alongside in humility, in giving people dignity, in not being too rushed to love and serve your neighbor.
No, I think it's huge. I think you said eye contact. I mean, eye contact is something that we all can do, but it's something that we often avoid. Right? This idea of, you said, hey, it's spending time, right? Choosing to give that time. And I think building relationships. Yeah. When we talk about time, I think the big thing that we've been kind of talking about that kind of stood out in what you said, not just about grace and truth, but this idea, are you willing to be interrupted, right, for God's glory? Are you willing to allow your life to be interrupted? The schedule that you've put in place, all the things you have planned to do that week, everything that's going on, are you willing to allow yourself to be interrupted for God's glory, so that other people can know God? And that does require a relationship. Talk to me a little bit more about relationships, because relationships, as you already mentioned, they're messy. They're an interesting dynamic, right? And when we talk about things like domestic violence, we talk about homelessness, we talk about incarceration, we talk about sex trafficking, we talk about any number of these hot buttons that are going on in our culture and society, in which we tend to overlook, right? Or we're just more inward focused and pretend like that doesn't really happen where we live, but it does. All these big things come back to this idea of relationship, right? And the idea of, you have an interesting thought on how that actually gets restored.
Yeah. So, as we look at the kids and the families that we serve and the young adults that we serve, their pain, their brokenness, the abuse, the abandonment, and neglect happen in the context of family. And so where is the last thing that these kids want to have or be in is a family. It's like, why would I want to go there if that's where I got hurt? And yet, isn't it like God to take something that caused so much pain, and he uses that to bring healing?
Yeah.
We talk about, that we're in the business of transforming lives of at-risk kids through the healing power of family. We believe that family is where restoration happens, where new life happens. And it's kind of not a new concept. That's kind of what the Bible is all about, right? Mm-hmm. Like, we were separated from God because of sin and brokenness. I mean, you even look at Genesis, right? The first family was jacked up. They were dysfunctional.
Right.
Adam and Eve sinned. They shame God. We put leaves on. And don't look at us.
Right.
And then look at their offspring, Cain and Abel. One of
Yep.
them kills his brother. It's like, man, talk about, they
Drama.
needed foster care.
Yeah.
It was in the Bible, see?
Yeah.
But God brings that tool where the brokenness happened and says, I can redeem it.
Yeah.
I think of that song by All Sons and Daughters or whatever, like you make all things new, right? And he's making families new. And sometimes it's with that biological family where the pain happened and kids are reunified with their parents. And sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's with a new family. And our prayer is that it's a family that loves Jesus.
Right.
That where these kids are introduced to the heart of God, that they have a destiny and a purpose and a calling.
Yeah, it's good. And I think sometimes to that point, it's the family of God. God uses the family of God, the church, the community of faith, to bring restoration, to bring renewal, to do a work in people's life where people can begin to trust again, begin to find friendship again, and experience the hope of Christ. And as we've kind of talked about this today, Jaime and I are going to continue to talk, but I just want to say, if you're here today and you've experienced what that's like to be accepted into the family of God, and you've put Jesus first in your life, and you're here today and you want to be baptized, you came, you signed up to be baptized, I want to excuse you to just kind of head out to the lobby real quick, and to go ahead and you can change your clothes or kind of prepare and get ready for that. And if you're even here today and you didn't plan on getting baptized, again, we want to make that invitation available to you. We have everything that you need if you want to take next steps towards that. We want to celebrate new life in Christ. We want to celebrate a fresh start. We want to celebrate God's restoration in your life. And so I invite you to kind of just head out and do that as well. I know some of you are looking at your notes and you stress out about things like this. You're like, you haven't given the fill-ins yet. You know what I'm saying? Like you're looking at it, you're like, we can't leave church without the fill-ins. You know what I mean? Well, here's my idea about the fill-ins. I wanted to give them to you today as a way of kind of like something you can process throughout the week, as a way of something you can think through. Here's my hope of having Jaime come in today is not that you would just learn about Olive Crest, not that you would just see it as a partner of Cityline Church, but that you, as you sit in this room today and as God is working in your life, that you would take a posture of this before God. God, I open my hands to you and I open my heart to you. I open my hands to you and I open my heart to you, and I just ask, God, what do you need me to do? God, how can I help? We say this all the time at Cityline. We may not know all the answers all the time. We might not have everything figured out all the time, but there is one question that you and I can consistently ask that changes the direction and the game of everything going on in our life, and that is, what does love require of me? What does love require of me? So I want to encourage you today that as you kind of sit and you kind of hear these fill-ins, as you process through them this week, there's some scripture references there that you can read about and talk it over with somebody about, or just kind of process through together. I want to encourage you to do that. And I think really what it comes down, 1 John 3:17 and 18, he says, if anyone has material possessions and sees a brother or sister in need and has no pity on them, how can the love of God be in that person? Dear children, let us not love with words or speech, but with actions and truth. Let us not love with words or speech, but actions and in truth, which says, you know what? Let's not just talk the talk. Let's not just have all the right answers. Let's not just talk about Jesus as like this philosophical thing, this understanding that we know about. Let's actually put some skin in the game. Let's act on what we say we believe. Let's begin to live out who we say that we are as a follower of Christ with action and in truth. And if we're going to do that, I think that requires us to decrease our selfie game. To decrease our selfie game. How do you do that? I think it's first understanding that service is more important than status. Service is a lot more important than status. That's just the reality. When we serve, we're not trying to shine a light on us. We're not serving so we can take the selfie as we're serving, right? We're not doing that. What we're doing is we're serving because we follow Jesus, because of the love of Christ, because of what he's doing in our heart. The overflow of that, the outflow of that is I come alongside those who can't help themselves. I'm willing to get dirty. I'm willing to be interrupted. I'm willing to spend that time. Second is understanding that the actions are motivated by character instead of comfort. I think something true of me and probably of you as well is we make a lot of decisions in our life based on how comfortable it is. Is it going to be comfortable for me? Is it going to fit in with everything else that I want to do? Is it going to be way out of my way, or is it going to be comfortable? Jaime already said it. Following Jesus isn't always easy, and Jesus never called us to comfort. Jesus is all about our character development. It's who he's creating us to be, that we become the kind of person that sees a need and we address it. We're becoming the kind of person that chooses to come alongside. We're becoming the kind of person that holds our hands open wide, our heart open wide, and say, God, would you lead me to what you would have me to do? And then also there's seeing the significance of we over it's all about me. It's we over it's all about me. And I think that if we can get a hold of this concept, not only will it help us in serving and making an impact in our communities, but I just want to talk to husbands and wives for a second. Husbands and wives, if we can understand the concept of we over it's all about me, I think our relationships would begin to thrive. And I don't know who needs to hear that today. I don't know who's that speaking to. I didn't say that earlier today, but I just feel the need in this moment. God's impressing on my heart to share that with you. If we can understand the concept of we, we'll be better off. Married couples, you're on a team. You're in this together. God said the two, they leave their father and mother and they are joined together and they become one. They become we. They become us. When we join together with God, it becomes us and God. We have this relationship with us and God that is lived out with us and others. It's always about one another. It's always about seeing beyond ourselves. God calls us to be about we over it's all about me. And then lastly, it's caring more about worship than wealth. Caring more about worship than wealth. I think about this for a second. I mean, the way that we worship God, the way that we give back to God is not only just in our finances by putting him first in every area of our life, but our worship to God is in our daily living, everywhere we go and in everything that we do. And most of us make decisions not just based on comfort, but also on what's going to get us the most stuff, what we need to be the most successful, what we need to have everything that we've ever wanted. And God is asking us to hold that loosely and be more about our worship to him than it is amassing wealth for us. So that with what he has given us, with what he has placed in our hand, we'll be able to bless others as well as we lived our blessed life. It's all about who we are as Christ followers. And Jaime, I don't know if you have other thoughts on that, and just kind of a couple last pieces to kind of round this time out together.
Yeah, wanted to just first of all thank you guys. Whether you know it or not, actually Jack alluded to it. You took an offering at Christmas time, and we were the humble recipients of your generosity. And because of that, we will be able to house 6 transition age youth over the next several years through your generosity. So thank you so much for doing that. The last thing is, how can we serve? We kind of break it down into three options. One is to be family, to open up your heart and home to a child in need through Safe Families, which is temporary, keeping kids out of foster care just for a short-term basis, or to become a foster parent. That's a high calling. It's not for everyone. We know that very few will be called to that, but we want to make that invitation to you. Secondly is to be a friend. For those who are called to that high calling, to come alongside of them with a meal, with transportation, mentoring, tutoring, whatever it would look like. And then the last thing is to be an advocate. And that would be through prayer, generosity, one-time acts of service, spreading the word. So many people don't know about this crisis happening in our own backyard, and if they just knew, I think more people would get plugged in. So I'm outside in the courtyard, would love to answer any questions, and I'm so excited about what God is doing in the body of Christ, and how God is knitting our hearts together to love and serve those who are really, really close to his heart.
Yeah, amen. Can you guys do me a favor and just give Jaime another round of love for coming and hanging out, talking with us? I'm going to invite our worship team to come back out because we want to continue to celebrate and worship God through baptism. But I just want to make it clear as we kind of round out our time together, this is what we're called to, okay? We're called to serve others, not save others, okay? We're called to serve others, not save others. We're called to relate to others, right? Not rescue others. We're going to commit to leave the saving and the rescuing to Jesus. That's his role. That's his job. we're going to commit to serving. And the way that we're going to do that is we're going to reach out. We're not going to reach down. And it actually begins with, how can I help? How can I help? Just responding to God. God, how would you have me to help? We're going to say a word of prayer, and then we're going to celebrate with these that are getting baptized today, and looking forward to an incredible moment together. Let's pray.